Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the stars through the viewing window. His fleet of 200 ships moved through space like deadly sharks hunting for prey. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for over 1,000 years, and Kyung-ho had personally overseen the conquest of 43 different worlds. Today would be number 44. The encrypted message appeared on his command screen without warning. The bridge fell silent as the strange transmission played. The voice was calm, almost gentle, but the words sent a chill through the room. "Turn back now. The humans are not what they seem. This is your only warning." Jae Min, his trusted tactical officer who had served beside him for 15 years, laughed and shook his head. "Sir, this is clearly just mind games from the locals. Our advanced scouts spent 3 months studying Sol 3. These humans barely have rockets that can reach their own moon. Half their planet still uses primitive combustion engines for transportation." Kyung-ho nodded slowly, but his experienced instincts were bothering him. In all his years of conquest, he had never received a warning like this. Usually, primitive species either begged for mercy or threatened them with their pathetic weapons. This message was different. It felt like genuine concern, as if someone was trying to protect them from making a terrible mistake. He walked over to the intelligence station, where Lieutenant So-young was reviewing their data on Earth. The planet looked ordinary enough in their files: blue oceans, green continents, white clouds swirling in predictable patterns. The population was scattered across several continents, and their technology seemed centuries behind the Empire's capabilities. "What about these electromagnetic readings?" Kyung-ho asked, pointing to some unusual energy signatures their long-range sensors had detected. So-young frowned at her screen. "We're not entirely sure, Admiral. The patterns are unlike anything we've catalogued from other primitive worlds. Some of our scientists think it might be natural phenomena, maybe something to do with their magnetic field. Others believe it could be crude attempts at energy manipulation." The bridge crew continued their preparations as they approached the Sol system. Weapons Officer Dong-wook ran diagnostics on their planet-cracking bombs, while Communications Specialist Min-ho prepared the standard surrender demand they broadcast to every world before conquest. The message was always the same: submit to Imperial rule or face complete annihilation. But that mysterious warning kept echoing in Kyung-ho's mind. In his 4 decades of military service, he had learned to trust his gut feelings. Something about this mission felt wrong. The humans seemed too quiet, too prepared. Most primitive species panicked when they detected an approaching Imperial fleet. They sent desperate messages, launched futile attacks, or tried to negotiate. The humans were doing none of these things. As his fleet moved deeper into the solar system, Kyung-ho made a decision that would haunt him forever. Maintain course and prepare for standard conquest protocol. The moment Admiral Kyung-ho's fleet emerged from hyperspace, everything went wrong. The swirling colors of faster-than-light travel faded away, revealing the Sol system in all its terrifying glory. What they saw made every crew member on every ship freeze in absolute shock. Commander So-young's hands trembled as she stared at her sensor readings. "Admiral, this is impossible. Our advanced scouts reported a primitive civilization with basic rocket technology, but I'm detecting massive space elevators reaching from Earth's surface all the way to orbit. There are hundreds of space stations, mining platforms throughout the asteroid belt, and industrial complexes that rival our own Imperial shipyards." Lieutenant Dong-wook's voice cracked as he spoke from his weapons station. "Sir, the energy readings from these structures are off the charts. Some of these installations are larger than our battle stations. How did our intelligence get this so wrong?" Admiral Kyung-ho felt his confidence crumbling. The Empire's scouts were the best in the galaxy. They had mapped thousands of star systems with perfect accuracy, yet somehow they had completely missed a civilization that had clearly been spacefaring for decades, maybe centuries. The fleet hung in space, 200 massive warships suddenly feeling very small against the backdrop of human achievement. Mining operations stretched across multiple asteroids, connected by transport tubes that pulsed with constant traffic. Orbital rings circled several planets, and energy signatures suggested technology that the Empire had only theorized about. "Broadcast the surrender demand," Kyung-ho ordered, though his voice lacked its usual authority. Maybe we can still negotiate a peaceful annexation. Minho activated the communications array and transmitted the Empire's standard message across all frequencies. Attention, inhabitants of the Sol system, you are now subjects of the Zephyrian Empire. Surrender immediately and submit to Imperial rule or face the consequences of resistance. You have 1 standard hour to respond. The response came instantly, but not in the way anyone expected. Every human structure, every satellite, every space station, every piece of technology that had been glowing with activity just moments before went completely dark. Not destroyed, not damaged, but simply gone from their sensors as if they had never existed at all. Commander So Young frantically worked her controls, running every scan and diagnostic she knew. Admiral, I'm getting nothing. No heat signatures, no electromagnetic emissions, no radio signals. It's like the entire human civilization just vanished into thin air. Communications Officer Minho's face had gone pale. Sir, even their planet has gone quiet. No radio broadcasts, no satellite signals, no electronic emissions of any kind. 60 seconds ago, Earth was buzzing with the activity of billions of people. Now it's silent as a tomb. The bridge fell into an eerie quiet as the implications sank. In a civilization advanced enough to build space elevators and asteroid mining operations doesn't just disappear. Technology capable of supporting billions of people doesn't simply shut down without a trace. Admiral Kyung Ho stared at the now silent Earth, remembering the mysterious warning they had received. The gentle voice that had urged them to turn back suddenly seemed less like psychological warfare and more like genuine concern from someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Admiral Kyung Ho made the fateful decision to advance toward the mysteriously silent Earth. His fleet of 200 warships moved in perfect formation, their weapons powered and shields at maximum strength. They had conquered countless worlds using this same approach, and despite the strange circumstances, military protocol demanded they investigate. Take us past Mars orbit, Kyung Ho ordered. Maintain battle formation and keep all sensors active. I want to know the moment anything moves out there. The massive ships glided through space, their hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. Everything seemed normal for the first few minutes. Mars hung in the distance like a red jewel, and the space around them appeared completely empty. Even their most sensitive instruments showed nothing but cosmic dust and radiation. Then the universe exploded around them. What had appeared to be empty space suddenly came alive with millions of tiny flashes of light. Microscopic objects that had been invisible to their senses revealed themselves as sophisticated drones, each no bigger than a grain of sand, but packed with devastating firepower. Weapons platforms that had been perfectly camouflaged against the black void suddenly materialized, their surfaces shifting from perfect invisibility to deadly reality. "Contact!" screamed Tactical Officer Jae-min, but his warning came too late. The first wave of projectiles slammed into their lead ships with the force of meteor impacts. These weren't the crude kinetic weapons they expected from a primitive civilization. The projectiles seemed to phase through their shields as if they didn't exist, striking the hull directly and tearing through armor that had withstood plasma cannons and antimatter bombs. Commander So Young watched in horror as her sensor readings went crazy. "Admiral, I'm detecting weapons fire from every direction, but I can't see the sources. It's like the attacks are coming from empty space itself." The Imperial formation, which had maintained perfect order for over 20 years of conquest, began to fall apart. Ships that had survived hundreds of battles were being systematically destroyed by weapons that violated every known law of physics. The pride of the Empire's fleet, the dreadnought Thunder of Zephyr, simply broke in half as invisible forces tore through its spine. "Impossible," Jae-min whispered, his face pale with shock. "How did a species that barely reached their own moon develop stealth technology that makes our ships look like toys? Our intelligence said they were centuries behind us in development." Admiral Kyung Ho gripped his command chair as his flagship shuddered under multiple impacts. Through the chaos, he could see his captains trying desperately to coordinate a defense. But it was useless. Every time they moved to engage a target, The humans seemed to know exactly where they were going. Their evasive maneuvers were predicted and countered before they could even complete them. "All units, random evasive patterns," he commanded over the communication system. "Break formation and scatter." But even as he gave the order, Kyung-ho realized the terrifying truth. The humans weren't just technologically superior, they were fighting a completely different kind of war. Where the Empire relied on overwhelming firepower and traditional tactics, the humans had turned space itself into a weapon. They had spent years, maybe decades, preparing this killing field, seeding it with invisible death that waited patiently for the right moment to strike. The surviving ships of Admiral Kyung-ho's fleet limped toward a safe distance, their hulls scarred and smoking from the devastating human attack. What had started as a force of 200 mighty warships was now reduced to barely 60 functional vessels. The others floated as twisted metal debris, their crews lost to weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. Lieutenant Commander Min-ho worked frantically at his communications station, trying to make sense of the intercepted human transmissions. His specialized equipment had been designed to crack the codes of primitive civilizations, but the human signals were unlike anything he had ever encountered. The patterns were complex, layered with multiple encryption systems that would have challenged even Imperial intelligence. After hours of desperate analysis, Min-ho finally managed to decode fragments of the human communications. What he discovered made his blood run cold. He called Admiral Kyung-ho to his station, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Admiral, you need to see this. The humans haven't just been watching us since we entered their system. They've been studying the Empire for decades, maybe longer. Every world we conquered, every battle we fought, every species we destroyed. They were there, observing, learning, taking notes." Kyung-ho stared at the translated messages flowing across Min-ho's screen. The humans had detailed files on Imperial ship designs, weapon capabilities, shield frequencies, and tactical doctrines. They knew about the Empire's standard conquest, procedures, their formation patterns, even the personal fighting styles of individual admirals. Commander So-young looked up from her damage assessment reports, her face pale with realization. "Sir, this explains how they knew exactly where to hit us. They've reverse-engineered our entire technological base. Every expansion we made into new territories gave them more opportunities to study our capabilities." The devastating truth began to sink in. The Empire's greatest strength had always been its relentless expansion. Each conquered world provided new resources, new technologies, and new strategic positions. The Empire had grown so large and powerful that no single species could stand against them. But this expansion had also created their greatest weakness. "Were there?" Min-ho continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "At the conquest of Kepler 442b, they had observation posts hidden in the asteroid fields. When we destroyed the Andromedans, human ships were watching from the edge of the system. Every time we demonstrated our power, every time we showed our weapons in action, they were recording everything." Admiral Kyung-ho felt sick as he realized the scope of human preparation. How many species did we conquer while they watched? According to these intercepts, at least 30 major campaigns. They've been building detailed profiles of our military doctrine for over 40 years. They know our weak points better than we do. So-young's tactical analysis confirmed their worst fears. "Admiral, they've identified flaws in our shield harmonics that our own engineers missed. They know about the structural weakness in our hull plating that we classified as top secret. They even have psychological profiles of our command staff, predicting how we'll react under pressure." The Empire had believed its size and power made it invincible, but the humans had turned that very size against them. Every conquest, every demonstration of imperial might had been a lesson for humanity. They had watched the Empire destroy civilizations and had learned exactly how to destroy the destroyers. Now, facing an enemy that knew them better than they knew themselves, the survivors of the Fourth Fleet finally understood the true meaning of the warning they had received. The second wave of human attacks began without warning, and Admiral Kyung-ho realized they were facing something far beyond conventional warfare. What the humans unleashed defied every scientific principle the Empire had discovered in 1,000 years of galactic conquest. Engineer Hai-Wan stared at her instruments in complete bewilderment as human vessels appeared on her sensors, then simply vanished from reality before reappearing behind the Imperial formation. "Admiral, this is impossible. Their ships aren't using any known propulsion system. They're not moving through space, they're stepping outside of it entirely." The human vessels looked deceptively simple, nothing like the massive dreadnoughts and battle cruisers of the Empire. They were sleek, almost organic in design, and they moved with a fluid grace that seemed to mock the laws of physics. One moment they would be directly in front of an Imperial ship, the next they would materialize inside the enemy formation as if solid matter meant nothing to them. "Sir, our weapons can't lock onto them," reported Weapons Officer Dong Wook, frustration clear in his voice. "Every time we achieve target lock, they phase out of our reality. It's like trying to shoot at ghosts, but the human weapons had no trouble finding their targets. Projectiles that looked like simple metal slugs passed through Imperial shields, as if they weren't there, striking hulls with devastating precision. These weren't energy weapons or plasma bolts that could be deflected. They were something else entirely, something that treated the Empire's most advanced defensive systems like decorative lights. Marine Commander Jin Woo's voice crackled over the communications system, filled with panic and disbelief. "Admiral, we've got boarding parties, but these aren't like any soldiers we've ever fought. They know where we're going to be before we get there. My men set up ambushes, and the humans walk around them like they have a map of our intentions." Admiral Kyung-ho listened in growing horror as his Marines reported impossible encounters. Human soldiers who seemed to anticipate every tactical move, who positioned themselves perfectly to counter attacks that hadn't even been planned yet. It was as if they could see several minutes into the future, always staying one step ahead of Imperial forces. "They're not following any military doctrine we recognize," Jinwoo continued. "No formation patterns, no standard procedures. One minute they're fighting like commandos, the next like pirates, then like something we've never seen before. It's like they're making up new tactics in real time." Engineer Hai-Wan discovered something even more disturbing in her analysis of the human technology. "Admiral, I don't think they're using technology at all, at least not as we understand it. These ships, these weapons, they're breaking fundamental laws of reality. Matter doesn't phase through other matter. Energy doesn't ignore physical barriers. What they're doing should be scientifically impossible." The Empire had conquered thousands of species by following predictable patterns. They understood honor codes, military traditions, and logical tactical doctrines. But humans fought like no other species they had encountered. They used deception, creativity, and pure improvisation as weapons. They were willing to sacrifice ships, resources, even entire positions if it meant gaining a strategic advantage. Admiral Kyung-ho watched his orderly fleet dissolve into chaos as human forces attacked from angles that shouldn't exist, using weapons that violated physics, employing tactics that had no precedent in galactic warfare. For the first time in his long military career, he faced an enemy that fought not just to win, but to utterly redefine what victory meant. Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing desperation. Of his original fleet of 200 warships, only 17 remained functional. The rest floated as debris or had simply vanished into whatever strange dimension the humans used for their impossible attacks. His remaining ships were scattered, damaged, and running low on ammunition. The bridge crew worked in tense silence, their faces showing the strain of a battle they couldn't understand, let alone win. Every conventional tactic had failed. Every weapon system had proven useless against an enemy that seemed to exist outside the normal rules of warfare. "Commander So-young," Admiral Kyung-ho said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. "Activate the planet killer." The bridge fell. Silent. Every officer turned to stare at their admiral. The planet killer was the Empire's most feared weapon, a device so powerful it could crack entire worlds in half. It had only been used 3 times in Imperial history, and each time had ended a war instantly. The mere threat of its deployment usually brought entire species to their knees. Commander So-young's hands trembled as she accessed the weapons control systems. "Sir, are you certain?" The planet killer has never been used against a world with this level of population. We're talking about billions of lives. They left us no choice, Kyung-ho replied, though his voice lacked conviction. If we don't end this now, they'll destroy what's left of the fleet. At least this way we can prevent them from spreading their impossible technology to other systems. The massive weapon began its charging cycle, drawing power from the ship's core reactor and 3 backup fusion plants. The process took nearly 10 minutes, during which the remaining human forces seemed to pull back, as if they too understood the significance of what was happening. The planet killer's energy signature was impossible to hide, and its purpose was unmistakable. Lieutenant Dong-wook monitored the weapon's status from his station. Charging at 60%, Admiral, targeting systems locked onto Earth's core. At this power level, the planet will break apart completely. Engineer Hae-won watched her instruments with growing unease. Sir, I'm detecting some kind of energy. Build up around the weapon itself. It's not coming from our systems, it's external. As the planet killer reached 90% charge, something impossible happened. The weapon simply ceased to exist, not destroyed by enemy fire, not damaged by some exotic attack, but erased from reality as if it had never been built. One moment, it was there, humming with enough power to destroy a world, and the next moment there was empty space where it had been. What happened? Admiral Kyung-ho demanded, staring at the empty weapon mount. Before anyone could answer, the ship shuddered under a massive impact. The lights flickered and damage reports flooded in from every section, but the energy signature of the attack was horrifyingly familiar. Sir, Lieutenant Dong-wook whispered, his face pale with shock, we're being fired upon by our own planet killer. They didn't destroy it. They took it. Somehow they made it theirs and turned it against us. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just defeated their ultimate weapon, they had claimed it, converted it, and were now using it to destroy the very ships that had brought it to their system. In a matter of seconds, they had turned the Empire's most fearsome device into humanity's newest tool of war. Admiral Kyung-ho collapsed into his command chair, finally understanding that they faced an enemy unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The silence after the planet killer's destruction stretched for what felt like hours. Admiral Kyung-ho's remaining ships floated in space, their crews too shocked to move, too defeated to fight. The bridge of his flagship had become a tomb of broken dreams and shattered imperial pride. Then, cutting through the darkness, a single human vessel approached. It was small, almost insignificant compared to the massive imperial warships, yet every surviving crew member watched it with a mixture of fear and fascination. The ship transmitted a simple message on all frequencies. A white flag, the universal symbol of truce. Admiral, Commander So-young reported, her voice barely above a whisper. They're requesting permission to board. Kyung-ho stared at the approaching vessel. After everything they had witnessed, after seeing their most powerful weapons turned against them, he knew they had no choice. Grant them permission. All weapons offline. All Marines stand down. The human ship docked with surprising gentleness, its advanced systems somehow interfacing perfectly with Imperial technology. A single figure requested transport to the bridge, and within minutes the enemy they had come to destroy stood before them. Captain Lee appeared completely ordinary. Average height, maybe a bit shorter than most Imperial officers. Simple clothing. That looked more like a uniform from a peaceful exploration vessel than military gear. No visible weapons, no threatening posture, no signs of the advanced technology that had just devastated an entire Imperial fleet. The human looked like someone you might meet in a market or a library, not the representative of a species that had just redefined warfare itself. I am Captain Lee, the human said, speaking in perfect Imperial standard. The voice was calm, almost gentle, carrying none of the arrogance or triumph that victorious enemies usually displayed. We tried to warn you, just as we've warned every species that approaches this system. We genuinely don't want to fight, but we're always prepared to defend ourselves. Admiral Kyung-ho found his voice, though it came out as a hoarse whisper. How did a primitive species develop such impossible technology? Captain Lee smiled sadly, and that expression chilled Kyung-ho more than any threat could have. That's your first mistake, Admiral. We're not primitive, and this isn't our homeworld. The words hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Lieutenant. Dongwook actually stepped backward, his face going pale. Commander So Young gripped her console so hard her knuckles turned white. Earth isn't humanity's homeworld, Captain Lee continued, speaking as if discussing the weather. It's our fortress, a carefully prepared killing ground designed to eliminate threats to our actual civilization. Every structure you detected, every piece of technology, every defensive system, it was all built for one purpose: to stop invaders like you. Engineer Haewon's voice cracked as she spoke. Then where is your real home? Captain Lee's expression became unreadable. Somewhere you'll never find it. Somewhere the Empire will never threaten it. We learned long ago that the best way to protect what you love is to make sure your enemies never know it exists. The revelation shattered everything the Imperial officers thought they understood. Earth wasn't a conquered prize, or even a defended world. It was a trap, a carefully constructed snare designed to catch and destroy anyone foolish enough to threaten humanity. And the Empire had walked directly into it. Captain Lee walked to the center of the bridge, moving with the casual confidence of someone completely in control of the situation. The surviving Imperial officers watched in tense silence as the human reached into a simple bag and pulled out a small device that looked like nothing more than a basic datapad. Admiral Kyung-ho, Lee said, his voice still carrying that unsettling calm, I'm going to offer you something that very few Imperial commanders have ever received. A choice. The device activated, projecting a holographic display that filled the bridge with images from across the galaxy. Kyung-ho recognized several of the locations immediately. Major Imperial worlds, strategic outposts, fleet headquarters that were supposed to be among the most secure places in the Empire. You can return to your Empire, Lee continued, and report that the Sol system was empty when you arrived. Tell them that humanity died out from natural causes before first contact could be established. File your report stating that the electromagnetic readings were just natural phenomena, nothing more. Admiral Kyung-ho stared at the holographic images, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. And if I refuse? Without changing expression, Captain Lee touched the device. The images shifted, showing the same Imperial worlds, but now they were dark. Space stations that had been buzzing with activity were silent and empty. Orbital platforms that had defended these systems for decades were simply gone. Entire fleets that had been patrolling these sectors had vanished without a trace. This is happening right now, Lee explained matter-of-factly. Every action has consequences, Admiral. The moment your fleet opened fire on our defenses, these operations began. We don't believe in half measures. Commander So Young's voice shook as she spoke. That's impossible. Those worlds are thousands of light years from here. Even with the fastest ships, it would take months to coordinate attacks across such distances. Captain Lee smiled that same sad smile. Commander, your empire has been expanding for over 1,000 years. In all that time, did you never wonder if other species might be watching? Did you never consider that some civilizations might be more advanced than they appeared? The holographic display zoomed in on specific locations, showing details that made Kyung-ho's blood run cold. These weren't random attacks or chaotic destruction. The operations were surgical, precise, targeting exactly the right systems to cripple Imperial operations without unnecessary casualties. It was the work of people who understood the Empire better than its own leaders did. We've had people living among you for centuries, Lee continued. Humans who look like your species, who think like your species, who have risen through your ranks and earned your trust. They've been waiting patiently for this day, the day when the Empire finally threatened something we couldn't allow to be threatened. Lieutenant Dongwook's voice was barely a whisper. How many? Enough, Lee replied, simply. Your empire now faces an enemy that's already inside your borders, already integrated into your society, already positioned to strike at your most vital systems. We know your military codes, your defensive strategies, your supply lines, your weaknesses. Admiral Kyung-ho looked around his bridge at the faces of his surviving crew. These were good people who had served the Empire faithfully, who trusted him to make the right decisions. The choice Captain Lee offered wasn't really a choice at all. We'll report that Sol 3 was uninhabited, Kyung-ho said quietly, his pride crumbling like dust. 3 months later, Admiral Kyung-ho stood before the Imperial High Command in the gleaming capital city of Zephyr Prime. The massive chamber was filled with the Empire's most powerful leaders, their faces expectant as they waited for his report on the Sol System expedition. The weight of his lie pressed down on him like a physical burden. "The Sol 3 system proved to be uninhabited," he reported, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. "Our advanced scouts were correct about the primitive nature of any life that may have once existed there. The electromagnetic signatures we detected were natural phenomena, likely caused by unusual solar activity and magnetic field fluctuations." Supreme Admiral Tai Hyun nodded approvingly from the high podium. "Excellent work, Admiral. Another successful survey mission. We'll mark Sol 3 as unsuitable for colonization and move our expansion efforts to more promising systems." Kyung-ho accepted the commendations and filed his official report, but every word felt like poison in his mouth. That night, he sat alone, in his quarters, staring out at the stars and remembering Captain Lee's final words before the human had returned to his ship. "Admiral, before I leave, there's something else you should know," Lee had said, his expression growing more serious. "Your empire isn't the only threat approaching our region of space. We know about the others coming." The human had listed them with casual precision: the hegemony with their world-consuming fleets, the collective with their hive-mind armies, the swarm with their endless hunger for biological material. Civilizations that made the Zephyrian Empire look small by comparison, each one following the same path of expansion and conquest that had brought Kyung-ho to Earth. "They'll all receive the same warning you did," Lee had continued. "The same gentle suggestion to turn back. Most won't listen, just like you didn't. They'll assume we're bluffing or too primitive to pose a real threat." Kyung-ho had found his voice enough to ask, "And when they don't listen, then they'll learn the same." "Lesson you did," Lee had replied simply. "That some prey chooses to remain hidden not from fear but from mercy. We don't want to fight these wars, Admiral. We don't enjoy destroying fleets or dismantling empires, but we will do whatever is necessary to protect what matters to us." Now, months later, Kyung-ho quietly used his influence to redirect Imperial exploration fleets away from the Sol region. He buried survey reports, reclassified navigation data, and gradually built a buffer zone of uninteresting space around the human system. Other admirals complained about the inefficient exploration patterns, but Kyung-ho's reputation allowed him to maintain the deception. Late at night, he sometimes intercepted communications from deep space explorers representing other galactic powers. The hegemony's scout ships were moving toward human space. The collective's expansion fleets were planning new conquest routes. The swarm's biological ships were following scent trails that would inevitably lead them to Earth. Each time, Kyung-ho remembered Captain Lee's patient smile and wondered how many warnings were already being transmitted across the galaxy. How many species would receive that same gentle message, urging them to turn back? How many would dismiss it as primitive psychological warfare? And how many would learn, too late, that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their impossible technology or their reality-bending ships? It was their infinite patience, their willingness to wait centuries for the right moment, and their absolute commitment to protecting what they loved, no matter the cost.